Rules for addition equations. When addition is present in the equation, you will always use the inverse operation to isolate the variable. An inverse operation, inverse is kind of like reverse, it means the opposite. So the opposite of addition is subtraction. Remember, whatever you do to isolate the variable, you must also do to the other side of the equal sign. So for example, here I have 29 plus x equals 53. In order to isolate my x and get it by itself, I have to get rid of this plus 29. So in order to do that, I have to, well, the opposite of adding is subtract 29. That cancels this part of the equation out, but I have to remember that whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I have to do to the other. So we're also going to subtract 29. Okay, so now when I go through and subtract this, 13 minus 9 gives me 4, and 4 minus 2 gives me 24. I just found out that x equals 24. To check myself, can I substitute this back into the equation? So now I have 29 plus 24. When I add those two together, they should equal 53. Okay, and for this situation, if you just want to do a quick check with your calculator, you may go ahead and do that. Just double check on your calculator, see if when you add them together, it gives you the 53. If not, you may have done something incorrect, maybe in your subtraction. So it's something to go ahead and check. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on with rules for subtraction in equations. Okay, so I'm going to slide this down a little bit, extend my page just so that we don't see all of the other. So our rules for subtraction equations. When subtraction is present in an equation, it will depend on where your variable is as to whether you will do the inverse, which is the opposite, or whether you will flip-flop and perform the same operation. So you'll notice that as I'm looking at these two equations, both have subtraction. But what is different about them is, in this case, the variable is in the front position. And in question number 2, the variable is in the back position. Simple rule is that I oftentimes use, is for number 1. I always think in terms of when I'm working subtraction, in most cases, I know we're starting to work with integers, but I can kind of remember back to when I was in my early years of learning how to subtract. My front number, or that very first number, was always the largest number. So how can I get a larger number? Well, if I were to keep the same operation and subtract 153, that would give me a smaller number over on the right-hand side. But I just said that I needed a larger number where x was because that's what I was used to when I was younger. So I'm still going to use that same philosophy. So to get a larger number, well, it was subtraction, so the opposite is going to be to add 153. That's going to cancel this out. So that leaves me with x on the left-hand side. So now, in order for me to finish out the problem, I have to remember that I have to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to add 153. On the left-hand side, I have x left over by itself, so I isolated it. Over on this side, I'm going to go ahead and add those together. So 9 plus 3 is 12. Carry the 1. 4, 5 is 9, plus 1 would give me 10. And then 2 plus 1 would give me 4. I got 402. To check my answer, can I substitute my 402 back in place of x? And if I want to check that on my calculator, I can go ahead and punch it in. 402 minus 153. And when I do that, it should give me the 249, which is what I had right here. So I have the answer correct. So that's just a way that you can check yourself. And if you want to do that longhand, you may. But right now I'm not checking your addition, subtraction skills. I'm checking to see if you know the steps that you need to take to solve for that variable. Okay, so let's try the other situation. Over here in number 2, I have the variable sitting where it's being subtracted. So kind of like I did for number 1, just as a general rule, and I know that it's kind of different when we are working integers, but as a general rule, when I was younger, this was always the number that was larger. In my grade school years, you always had that front number when you had subtraction was always the biggest number. So I'm going to remember that as I try to decide, am I going to add or am I going to subtract? Well, if I add between the two numbers, because I know I have to move the 123 to the other side of the equal sign, that's going to give me a number that's bigger than 123, right? And I don't want that because my 123 is in the front spot. It has to be the largest number. So I'm going to go ahead and do a flip-flop. Now, as you get older in algebra, they're going to have you do these multiple steps, but in your years as you're starting to learn these, they're kind of confusing. So I tend to use just that flip-flop method of saying, hey, I know that when it's in the back and it's closest to the equal sign, I can go ahead and flip-flop. So now I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my equation. 123 stays the same. Minus, I'm going to shoot the 54 here. Now I'm going to put my m on this side. Equals m. So now I have m isolated. And in order for me to go ahead and get my answer, I'm going to go ahead and take 123 minus 54. Okay, I'm going to do this longhand. You can use your calculator if you want. I'm going to go ahead and do this longhand. Let's see, 3 minus 4 I can't do, so I'll go ahead and borrow. So 13 minus 4 gives me 9, and 11 minus 5 gives me 69. So I just found out that m equals 69. So to check myself, I can go ahead and substitute this back in, where m is. And here's where I'll go ahead and use my calculator. So on my calculator, I'm going to punch in 123 minus 69 and see if I end up getting that 54 again. 123 minus 69 gives me 54. And that was the answer that I should have had before. So 69 is my correct answer for this, for m. Okay, so I want you guys to go ahead and try a couple of samples here. I'm going to give you a couple minutes. On your computer or whatever you're working off of, you can go ahead and pause the video so that you're able to work out the problems. But I'll give you a couple of minutes to go ahead and do that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go through these so that you can check your answers. On number 1, we've got x plus 123 equals 438. So addition is, we're always going to do the opposite. So the opposite of adding, here's my equal sign, by the way. So how I know where to move is I need to get everything to the other side of that line. So right now I'm adding 123, I want to subtract 123. Because addition is always the opposite. Whatever I do to the one side, I have to do the other. So I'm going to subtract 123. Okay, so now I have x equals 8 minus 3 is 5, 3 minus 2 is 1, 4 minus 1 gives me 3. So you should have gotten x equals 315. And you can also check that on your calculator if you need to by substituting back in for x. So number 2 and 3, I've got subtraction going on. So my rule. The rule that I like to use, remember, is my front number should always be my largest number. So 273, until, of course, we start working with integers, those negative numbers, 273 should be the largest when I was in grade school. So I don't want a bigger number, which means I'm going to go ahead and do my flip-flop. Plus, the nice thing is if you're a visual learner, just remember if that variable is in this back position and you have subtraction, that's maybe your visual cue that, hey, these are really close to each other. We're going to flip-flop them. Okay, so if I rewrite this, I get 273 minus 120. That's going to give me what f is. So 273 minus 120 is going to give me 153. So f equals 153 is what you should have gotten for number 2. And for number 3, I'm going to use that same philosophy. I see that minus sign that signals in my head, oh, there's something I have to think about here. Okay, so this has to be my largest number. Larger number. In order to get that, I'm going to have to add to get a bigger number. So Right now it's minus 89 because here's my equal sign, so I'm going to say plus 89. So on this side, I also have to say plus 89. So now I have 1,093 plus 89, and that gives me 1,182. And over here, I still had n left by itself, so I just found out that n equals 1,182. To check myself, remember, on any of these, to check yourself, you can always substitute back in where that letter was and resolve the problem to see if you got what they originally had. Okay, that's working with adding and subtracting.